Hey guys, welcome back from the break. We're going to continue with this new socialist era between 2004 and 2011, when José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero was president of the government. And in this second part of the class, we're going to talk about the social progress that was made, particularly actually in the first term between 2004 and 2008. And we're going to refer to four different pieces of legislation. The first one being dependency law. Dependency law is a very interesting one. Actually, the full name of the law, I'm going to read it. It was a law for promotion of personal autonomy and care for people in a situation of dependency. And so the situation of dependency was a rather broad definition. And here we're talking about old age, we are talking about people with disabilities, or we are talking about people that by the end of the day cannot live an autonomous life. So this was a very, very, very ambitious law. Actually, history has judged it, and actually, the problem that this law has faced over time was that the funding, because of the economic crisis in 2006 and from 2006 to 2015, this law could not be fully developed. But it was quite interesting because actually it tried to address a problem. This lack of autonomy of these people, this dependency, from prevention of dependency and actually what could be done before a person lost more autonomy in their lives, from telematic assistance to people that were at their homes and provide them with services that could actually help them in their daily lives, to daycare centers for old age people, or also for people with disability, or home assistance for all these kind of people as well. And on top of all that, it was quite interesting how also created a kind of a financial aid system. Because by the end of the day, if you know Spanish welfare state, the Spanish welfare state relies heavily on families. Most Mediterranean welfare states do, so does Italy, for example. It relies heavily on the support families will give to those in situation of dependency. It's normal in Spain, actually, that younger generations will take care of those of an advanced age, and the other way around. Is quite interesting, all these dynamics. And actually, that people that take care of their elder, this law understands that should get some kind of financial aid, because by the end of the day, it's taking work out of the hands of the state. Something that should be part of a welfare state is being done by families. So this actually dependency law was aiming to that. But as I was saying, actually found limitation in terms of budget because of the financial crisis. This was one of the first parts of the budget that was cut. But quite an interesting law, introduced new terminology and new concepts to our welfare state, and still to be seen whether we can fully develop it one day or not. Another interesting law of this period was the law of historical memory. And you know about Civil War, you know about Francoism, you know a little bit, you know about the transition, and how our transition was a transition and not a rupture. We tried to continue, we tried to move on from the point we were in between 1975 and 1978 without actually judging what happened during the dictatorship. And that resulted on things like that. Actually, that's a picture of a street that I lived on when I was a teenager. At that time, I lived in Tenerife, and my street was called Rambla General Franco, Street of General Franco. This is, if you think about it, it's absolute shenanigans. It doesn't make any sense in a modern democratic state to name any street after a dictator. And it could be a dictator, as in my case, I lived in this street, or it could be generals that were part of his government, or generals that fought on his side during the Civil War. So they were, part of this law tried to get rid of all these symbols that still kind of glorified those who were part of the dictatorship, those who were part of that rebel side during the Civil War. That was one of the measures, but another one that it was very important as well was, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Spain is the second country in the world with the biggest number of disappeared people that we don't know where they were buried. And this obviously was a result of the Civil War and also the repression during the dictatorship. Actually, what this law did was provide with funding for those who were actually looking for the relatives that they didn't know where they died. They didn't know where they were buried after the Civil War or during the dictatorship. So funding was given to them. And last thing that this law did, well, among other things, but it was the three main aspects, was also to declare any kind of court ruling during Francoism was declared illegal. So if anyone had been sentenced during Francoism, that sentence will be null. I mean, so pretty much declaring that justice illegal, null. Another important piece of legislation during this period of time, and remember that we were talking between 2004 and 2008, the first term of Zapatero, was the gay marriage law. Actually, Spain was the third country in the world to pass gay marriage legislation, and this was in 2005. And this law was very ambitious because it was very simple. The only thing that this law did, the only reform that it did, was changing the concept of marriage in our civil code. Marriage will no longer be the union between a man and a woman, as the civil code will say. Actually, marriage will be the union of two people. And that very simple case, that very simple change made it very comprehensive, because any right that any marriage had before this reform will have it afterwards. So this meant that any marriage, any married couple could, for example, adopt. Any married couple could have the same fiscal consideration, so to say. So by the end of the day, it was making an equivalence between any kind of marriage. Didn't really matter who were the two people getting married. And as I was saying, we were the third country in the world to pass this kind of legislation, only after the Netherlands and Belgium. However, you can imagine, because of Spain being such a traditional country, that this resulted in tension and criticism from particularly the church. It was one of the very last times that the church got really involved in politics and demonstrated. I think this is something that we kind of mentioned in class already. And by the end of the day, what they wanted was not to call this marriage, because they understood marriage was a union between a man and a woman. But eventually, nowadays, actually in Spain, this is not a contested issue anymore whatsoever. So I think this this was and it was the determination of Zapatero, as in the other two cases, the leadership of Zapatero, that pushed these issues into the top of the agenda. And last but not least, we're going to mention it because we already talked about it in class. The last piece of legislation that it was very kind of innovative, so to say, of this period of time, it was the gender equality law. And we mentioned it and how trying to break that glass ceiling and try to, we talked about quotas in class, etc., etc. So you can see that overall, about Islamic controversy, should not say that there, but it should actually say social progress, but I didn't change it from a previous slide. But by the end of the day, what you can see between 2004 and 2008, many social changes took place in Spain. Social progress was dominating the agenda at that time. We had not been hit by the crisis yet, and we were advancing on social issues that we hadn't advanced yet in this country, and big changes were made in a very short period of time. So that's what I want you to take from this class, that Zapatero Zapatero government really pushed all these social issues, and that's what we will be remembered for. So we're going to leave it here. In the next class on Monday, we're going to talk about actually the second part of the Zapatero government and how they managed the crisis. And this is where Zapatero, got things a bit more complicated and had to deal with it. So have a nice weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Bye.